Okay, just making sure sound and the screen is up. Are we good to go?
Sounds good.
Sure. Okay. So, hello there, and welcome to the MS Developer User Group United's 4th lockdown event. In these unprecedented times, we have decided to unite all of the user groups in South Africa to bring you fantastic content from amazing speakers straight to your living room or home office or kitchen or wherever you are. My name is Gomolemo, and I'm one of the co-organizers, and today I am joined by this amazing team behind the scenes who put in so much work before, during, and after all of these events. So just brushing through some tech-related updates, UnoConf 2020 took place very recently. It was an online conference for fans of the Uno platform. This year's edition was complemented with speakers from Microsoft, the Uno core team, as well as the community. If you want to check out a recording of this event, you can head on over to their website, unoconf.com. We are about a month away from our virtual Microsoft Ignite conference. Head on over to their website to get updates on all of the happenings for this year. You can come and learn about all the innovative ways to build solutions using some very cool tech. In honor of Women's Month in South Africa, Microsoft is sponsoring an 11-week hackathon challenging teams of 3 to 6 people to develop apps to support those experiencing gender-based violence. This is a very prevalent issue in the country, and to have an initiative that supports the development of solutions to tackle the shadow pandemic is truly commendable. Registration is currently open, and please do check out the site to find out how you can get involved. .NET Conf is making its glorious return in November of this year. This year is centered around the .NET 5 launch, which is exciting because there will be just one .NET unified platform going forward. So come and celebrate and learn about this brand new release. Something else which is happening this year is the Global Microsoft 365 Developer Bootcamp. These are free one-day hands-on training events led by MVPs incorporating tech and products now included in the Microsoft 365 platform. This year, they will be virtual and the dates to be announced very soon. Currently, it is set to tentatively be in November. Here in South Africa, we will have a combined Durban, Joburg, and Cape Town event, so keep your eyes and ears open just for those announcements. Next month, we have an amazing evening planned for you right here on MS Doug United. We have Gerald, Quentin, and Dustin speaking about all things code spaces, Docker, and Azure functions. Then after that, in October, we have Jerome, Roma, and Gordon sharing all good things about the Uno platform, making your own bots, and Cloudflare. I personally can't wait for these nights, and I hope to see you all there. But ahead of us tonight, we have 3 amazing speakers with incredible talks. However, we won't be introducing them just yet. Just to inform those who don't know, this box that we are currently in is a Teams live event, which enables you, the audience, to interact with us, but most importantly, the speakers through live Q&A, which you can access in the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can submit questions whenever, and we will do our very best to get them all answered just for you. Because we are trying to emulate that real-world meetup experience as close as possible, we have a virtual networking part that you can join after this live stream. It is not a Teams live event. It's just a normal Teams meeting. So you can, by option, come in, turn on your mics and cameras, and just talk about anything. You can access this stream, this meeting on aka.ms, ms-doug networking once the stream is over. And lastly, we have sessionized pages for ms-doug. So if you want to submit a talk, please do so at the following links. And with that, I will now hand it over to Johan to introduce our first speaker of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Homa. That was a very nice and warm welcome. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. You choose to spend your time with us. So I hope it is a good use of your time, that you learn something, and that you have fun, and that you enjoy the evening with us. I'm going to introduce Steven Thewissen. Steven is a Xamarin developer and Microsoft MVP author and blogger from Hillsburg in Netherlands. So it's an absolute honor to have you here with us, Steven. Steven is also a full-stack .NET developer with a passion for mobile development in Xamarin, and he started working with Xamarin in 2014. So he loves to focus on crafting fancy UIs, which is what tonight's talk is about. He enjoys tinkering with Azure Devops and DevOps REST APIs. And when he's not coding, you can find him writing blogs, tweeting, playing soccer, or just having some fun and occasional drinks with his friends. He's got a wonderful blog site. I've enjoyed some of the articles on there, so go and check it out at www.thewisen.io. Thewissen. Really insightful articles on there. I'm going to quote Steven on something, and we're going to hold him to it. He says, "If you bring cookies, chocolate, and/or nice beer, we can quickly become best friends." So we're going to hold you to that, Steven. I've known you for about 4 days, and I really feel I must just get the chocolate and cookies over to you, and we'll be best friends. And but thank you and welcome, Steven. Enjoy the talk. He's going to talk about building beautiful apps in Xamarin Forms, a very relevant and popular topic in the development community and in business these days. It's really important for us as developers to focus on what the industry needs, and if we can learn from an experienced MVP like Steven, it's worth more than gold. So thank you. Over to you. Enjoy the talk.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, and I'll be looking forward to beer and cookies and chocolate. I assume everyone can see everything and hear me and all that good stuff. So I'm just gonna start off. So building beautiful apps with Xamarin Forms. I had an introduction sheet, but Johan already pretty much introduced me. So yeah, I'm a mobile developer. I live in the Netherlands. You can find me on the interwebs on all these social thingies. I stream on Twitch. I do my code on GitHub. I'm pretty active on Twitter. So yeah, just find me there if you need anything from me. And I also want to preface this with, I am not a designer. There are people out there with actual educations in design. I am definitely more a developer than a designer. I just happen to enjoy tinkering with design, and I'm a Photoshop aficionado, so to speak. So yeah, that's me. Let's quickly get started here. So this Xamarin Forms thing, just one sheet about what that actually is. For the people that don't know, I think you had David Ortnow last time around, which also probably talked about Xamarin Forms. So what is it? It's a cross-platform UI framework.
And David talked about you.
And David talked about me. Oh boy, I missed that one. Curious to see what he said. But yeah, it's a cross-platform UI framework, meaning basically you can build an app for iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, TVs using Tizen, wearables like Apple Watch or any Android type watch, basically from a single code base. So, and the code that comes out of that is completely rendered natively. So it's indistinguishable from an actual app if you were to build it in Xcode or in Android Studio. So yeah, it's a pretty cool framework. I've been working with it for quite some time, actually, since it came out way back in, I think, 2014 at this point. So yeah, it's been around for a while. So back to the title of this session, and there's basically two things I wanna highlight here. And the first thing is basically beautiful apps, because that statement in and of itself makes you wonder, like, what actually is a beautiful app? What makes an app beautiful? And that's one thing I wanted to explore real quick. So the actual answer to that question is I don't have an answer for you, because what's beautiful is very subjective. What you like is maybe something that I don't like, and the other way around probably applies as well. But if we look at this screenshot that I put up here, we can pretty much tell that this is a pretty old app at this point, somewhere before iOS 7, most likely, because it uses a design language that Apple used to use called Skeuomorphism, which basically means make it look as real as possible by using textures, for example, the wood texture on the top here, and the icons are also a specific style, a bit more towards the realistic, and we simply can't imagine a modern app looking like this anymore. It's really dated, and that's where all that trend stuff comes in, because currently we're in I would say personally, a flat UI type of movement. There's not a lot of textures and that kind of stuff going on anymore in most designs. And to take a closer look at that whole trend part, 9to5Mac did a pretty cool article quite some time ago, I think a few years ago, about a few apps that you might know about. This one, for example, is Yelp, but they also did a few other ones, I think Facebook, for example, as well. And basically highlighting 10 years of design evolution in these apps that have been around for quite a while. So looking at this one, for example, on the left, you can tell by the form factor of the screenshot that it was a pretty clunky small device that was running on back in the day. But it was also very simple. It was a basic list, no fancy visuals anywhere to be seen. Just a list, to the point, and maybe even better than today's apps in that sense. But we see a quick evolution into a design where it's basically tiles, so icons with some accompanying text, starting off on very cool looking gradients, because gradients are the best thing you can have in your app. We have a logo in there, and at some point they shifted away a bit from that gradient ID and went into a bit more of a flat movement. That was still a few years away before Apple actually made the change, but you see these apps already kind of veering towards that new trend. The logo somehow disappears from the title bar. I have no idea why that is. We'll see that come back again later. So moving on, we have here the actual switch to modern or more modern looking design, where it's back to a list again, but with small icons. We see images in here now, which basically is most likely due to the fact that data plans became more affordable. So sending all sorts of images towards your mobile just got more affordable, and more apps started doing it. And after 2014, we can see another shift, or multiple shifts, because the logo's back again. And also we kind of shifted back to this icon with text kind of combination, only the icons are different now. And yeah, it's basically things come and go and they come back again. And it tells me one thing, and that's that a designer is a fickle beast. They have their ideas and they keep changing. And as developers, we have to adapt to that. So what is it that makes us look at this screenshot and basically decide this is looking old, this is dated? I think it's mainly because in today's world, we have apps that update very frequently, I would say. If I leave my updates uninstalled for about a week, I think I have 30 app updates or something. And it's not always big giant overhauls, obviously. I think it's mainly small tweaks left and right, and slowly your eye gets trained to what is the current design style. And that makes it easy to pick out things like this and say, well, that's just dated. And every once in a while, obviously, an app maker will do a huge overhaul. You will go on Twitter, you will rant about it, get mad, and well, they won't change it back most of the time anyway. But one can safely say that designers keep you busy. And the thing is, though, that even though you have a great looking app, if it has no substance or it doesn't get the user to what he wants to achieve, it's still going to be rubbish. And you can also be quite a good developer, but that doesn't make you a great designer. I've seen that firsthand. Being somewhat somewhat infectionate with design. I still have designers on my team, on my day job, and they just, well, they blow me away every time I speak to them. So yeah, it's always some kind of finding a middle ground between what looks very fancy and how much time can we spend on building that. So in the end, it's always about money and yeah, finding a balance between all of that. But it's definitely a specialized craft, designing. So the other part that I wanted to highlight in the title of this talk is Xamarin Forms, because it's kind of had a bad reputation for quite a while now. I think it's far less relevant than it's been, but it's worth touching upon real quick. Sorry, I had to take a sip there. So why is that? Well, the original marketing idea for Xamarin Forms back in 2014 was it's only suitable for simple data entry apps. That's what they marketed it as, and I think at the time that statement rang true. There is just a lot of stuff currently in there that was not in there at the time, and it made sense to position it like that. And basically what they said is if you want something that looks good, just use Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android. You'd still have to build your app twice, but or your UI twice actually. But the charms of Forms is basically build your UI once as well, right? So I think at some point there was this shift towards we need to make Forms bigger and better because the idea of it appeals to people. So it evolved over time, and it's a lot of the stuff that is in there right now just wasn't there. But what I think is people saw that in the beginning, that whole data entry app thing, and that idea kind of stuck around, and people didn't revisit it. Maybe along the way they chose some other technique, and they just haven't really been caught up with what can be done using Forms these days. And I think also the association with the word forms, well, I don't know what associations you have, but to me something like web forms or WinForms comes to mind, and those don't exactly make fond memories for me, at least. But what I do think also is that there has been a shift in design focus over the years. So the original idea was we build an app and it looks like iOS on iOS and it looks like Android on Android. But I think that trend has gone more and more towards make it look exactly the same on both platforms. And I think for that, Forms is very powerful because it's really easy to make that happen. So yeah. It had a bad reputation, but to me at least it's undeserved at this point. So I already mentioned design is a very specialized craft. So what if you as a developer want to embark on the journey of a lifetime, as you could call it, and make some awesome looking apps, and you don't have a designer on speed dial? You need to start somewhere, obviously. And there are some common elements that you can use to spice up those designs that you make. And I want to take a look at some of those. And I think the most essential tool in every designer's toolkit is the gradient. And obviously not the ones that I put up here, which are awesome, but don't make for a good app. But I think in modern app design, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find an app that doesn't have a gradient of some sort, even if it's just a simple fade over an image or something like that. I think it's pretty hard to find one. And there are some solutions out there. Skeuomorphism, for example, well known among some of you probably, which is basically a cross-platform drawing library. So you can draw any type of gradient that you want pretty much. Magic Gradients is one of those that has support for CSS. So you can just grab a CSS generated gradient and put that in, which is pretty cool because most designer tools these days, like Figma or Sketch or Adobe XD, allow you to generate CSS from them. So you can pretty much just take exactly the same gradient from your design software into your app. Pancake View, which is a component that I built myself, pretty much to suit my own gradient needs a few years ago, because support for gradients wasn't that great back then. And coming soon, we have the built-in Xamarin Forms gradients. I'm not sure if they're coming in 4.8 actually, but they have been announced, and I think they're either coming in the next release or in they're currently experimental. So I'm very excited for that one because it's basically what you want, but then built into the platform. So shadows on the surface don't look that important, but to me at least they are, because they create a visual cue for your users. Looking at this screenshot here on Windows NT, which has been a while, you can pretty much see that it also uses shadows, right, to highlight those buttons. The selected button has a heavier shadow. The other buttons also have a shadow and a bit of a highlight on the top. And it tells you that that's something you can interact with. It pops off the page, and it gives you some sort of hierarchy in 3D space, if you want to call it that. If there were no shadows highlights on those buttons, they would just be flat surfaces sitting on top of some other gray surface. It would be very bland and you wouldn't be able to tell that that is something you can interact with. These shadows, to build them in Xamarin Forms, is pretty simple if you want to use iOS. Basically, they have this entire drawing library around shadows, so you can make them in all sorts of shapes and forms, colors, positions. Everything is pretty much configurable. So the problem we have, because Xamarin Forms serves multiple platforms, is that on Android, your shadow usage is kind of limited, because the basic design language that Android uses, Material Design, has its own idea behind how shadows work and how you should use them in your app, which I'll try and explain in a bit more detail. So if you look at an app from the side, if that's even possible, you basically see that you have the big black line on the left side. That's your canvas. So that's where your entire app lives on. And your app is always being lit by two lights. We have a key light and an ambient light. And those lights are always in the same position. So if you have an empty canvas in your app and you start stacking elements on top of that, so for example, a card or a tab bar or a navigation bar or something like that, you can influence its elevation, which basically means that on the Z-axis, it moves closer towards the lights or further away from the lights. And those lights cast a shadow, obviously. So the closer they are to the light, the bigger the shadow becomes. And the closer they are to the canvas, the smaller it becomes. And because you can't change the position of those lights, it's really hard to get something like a shadow on the top side of a bar or a card or something like that. I think shadow color was recently added, but it's still quite limited. So what you could do here is use something like Skeuomorphism to just draw the shadows the way you want them. Or even simpler, if you have a pretty simple shadow, you could just bake it into an image and use that image instead. So you don't have a hardware generated shadow, but just fake it using an image. Or what you could do, and this will make your designer friends unhappy, is just accept that the platforms are different and have their separate little quirks, and that your app will look just a bit different on both apps or on both platforms. So I think the main thing that shapes your app visually is typography and colors. Obviously, most companies have their own little style guide, but that's mainly used for things like written copy or mail signatures and all that kind of good stuff. I think apps are pretty low on the list of priorities for that kind of stuff. So what could happen is that your company uses a style that doesn't really fit well with an app, and that's where you might get some struggles going, basically. So if you want to just dive into this kind of stuff, I think the most important thing, fonts, there are, I don't know, millions probably out there, but there are some free options, and I think the ones from Google Fonts especially, they're pretty much the de facto standard these days. I think most of the websites just use fonts from Google Fonts, and they're all free. For icons, Font Awesome is a pretty popular library. But the thing is, if you're the kind of person that struggles with this kind of stuff, like which colors match with one another, which fonts go well together, all that stuff, the internet has come to the rescue, because there are a lot of people who are writing all sorts of cool stuff. So something like, for example, a generator that can generate basically an entire color palette based on you providing either one color or maybe even no colors at all. So if you provide, for example, a certain shade of red, it'll take that and do some calculations and pick some other colors that go well with that. And the same thing goes for fonts, basically. If you have a header font of some sorts and you want to have a body font that goes well with that, there are some AI trained models and generators out there that can help you with that. I have a few links of that all the way near the end of the presentation. So once all of that good stuff is out of the way, you have a pretty cool looking app probably, but that last little thing that breathes real life into your app is animation, and that can be micro animations like you see here on screen. So that's basically a really small thing. For example, here these little dials shift when you click on it, or a brightness gauge becomes a bit fuller or emptier depending on what's happening. And I think one of the more telling examples is if you have a shopping app with a little shopping cart, you can see the product visually fly into that, or the cart shakes a little or does something. So that's more and more visual feedback that something has changed, something happened. So you're not just tapping on buttons and getting the feeling that nothing's happening, whereas in the background it's actually doing something. So that really breathes a lot of life into your app to make it a bit less dull. So additionally, if you want to go big, you could go bigger, obviously, with animations where entire screens are animating in and out. You can see here in this sample, if you click on a product, the image transitions into the next page, and it all looks very fancy, and everything slides and moves along the screen. So there's a few options if you want to go that route. Xamarin Forms actually has a pretty cool built-in API for that. It basically allows you to scale, rotate, translate some stuff on the screen, all those basic movements, and you can chain them together to create insane animations, basically. And Xam animation already basically did that for you. So things like a pulse animation or something flipping on a certain axis, that kind of stuff is already pre-built basically on top of that. And if you see that transition where the product fades into the next page, that can be done using a separate plugin that has been built for Xamarin Forms. So with all of that out of the way, you have basically a few things to look at if you want to get started. But the thing is, it's not just about fancy visuals, because that's what we've been talking about so far. It can look very cool, but there's other stuff that impacts your beautiful design a lot. One of which is user experience, for example. And One sample of that is, for example, this thing right here. You have an invoice, you can perform some actions on that. You could either list all the actions in icons and do that kind of stuff. Well, that pretty much confuses your user probably more than it helps him. Whereas in the second sample, you basically have your main call to action, which is paying the invoice, in big, bold, green button, and all the other actions tucked away neatly in a more menu. Other things, navigation flow also falls under user experience. So if you take 20 steps to get to where you want to be, you're obviously doing it wrong. It needs to be simple and easy to get to where you want to be. Oh, I'm skipping over something. So consistency as well. If you have, for example, certain swipe to delete type of action, and somewhere else in your app you're using a button for that, that's not very consistent. You want your users to experience the same, the same experience everywhere, basically. So it only confuses users if there's multiple ways of doing something. So just be consistent in that and be aware of that. And that also helps users train themselves unconsciously in your app, so they just know if I swipe on this, it's going to get deleted, and they don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff anymore. Copywriting is also very important because it conveys your context and your intent of your actions, and also copywriting combined with consistency. Like if you name something delete somewhere and you name it remove somewhere else, that's not very consistent. And moving on to performance, well, I think that speaks for itself. You can make something animate in all sorts of crazy ways, but if it starts to become so complex that your device just can't handle it, the whole animation and the whole experience basically falls flat on its face. Performance, just a chug or a little lag or delay in an animation, you really pick up on that really fast. So you need to find a balance between that. And with mobile apps, obviously there is such a magnitude of devices out there with all kinds of different processors and graphics thingies. Yeah, the performance is really something where you need to kind of go for a common denominator when it comes to devices and work from that. And I think one of the more important ones, accessibility. Not everyone is the same. We have people with cognitive disabilities, with visual disabilities. So if you have a red and a green button, some people might see that as one and the same. So you need to kind of figure out where the sweet spot on that is as well. So if you want to really get started on doing all of that stuff, so this was mainly theory up until now. Main reason behind that is because it really isn't that hard or that technical to build something cool. Because what I usually start with, at least, is to define everything that I have in styles. So if you have any experience with web development, using an HTML and a CSS file, well, a CSS file, that's basically what this is, but then in Xamarin Forms. So you define a style, you say every button in my app has this specific style, and you can override that for explicit buttons if you need to. But I just basically write out all my styles, apply them throughout the app, and that also makes it easy to just switch it out, for example. So if you have a dark and a light mode on your app for this sample here, you can make a dark mode button and a light mode, and just by the flip of the switch out those styles, and you should be good to go. So what I personally like to do is just separate all of my stuff into separate files. Buttons go in one file, colors in the other, and then all the way at the end, basically just pick those and merge them together into one big style dictionary, which contains everything. And for me, back when I got started into this whole UI thing in Xamarin Forms, what I like to do, and I think is a great exercise for anyone that wants to get into this, is to just find some inspiration online. So sites like Dribble or Upblast or Behance as well. they have so many talented people making very cool designs, or maybe you just have an app on your phone that you like. And what you can do is just challenge yourself to try and build that, dissect what makes up that design, what works, what doesn't work, and why it works, and then just try and see if you can emulate that that same experience in a Xamarin app. I've done that a few times. I've blogged about it, and more people are doing that as well in the community. And I think it's a really good exercise also to figure out what tools you have and how you can use them. So if you do get a design and you like one that you found, you need to just split it up into parts. Obviously, you can't build the entire thing in one go. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. So split it up into manageable parts, dissect those, see what makes that up. Think about how you can combine maybe certain elements so that you achieve what you're after. And if you have, for example, a control like a small picture that you put on the top right of the app with a name next to it, you could make that into a templatable control and just repeat that everywhere in your app from that same control. So if you ever have to change it, you just have to change it once. And yeah, just know what you have at your disposal. Xamarin Forms has all sorts of controls, from stack layout, grid, just layout controls, to labels, text boxes, you name it. You need to know what you have and what you can do with it. And I think for any person building something, knowing what's in your toolbox is a very important skill. So what I wanted to do is just quickly dissect a design that we saw earlier, which was the one with the fancy animations going on. So I've actually dissected this and built an app out of it, which you can find on GitHub on the link down below here. I'll share all of this later. So just looking at this, the first page, if you look at it very simply, it's a grid with 2 rows. You have a row on the top, which has all the products, row down below, which has all the cart stuff. And depending on whether or not you have the cart open, one expands and the other becomes smaller. So that's basically just height adjustments that are happening there. If you zoom in a bit further into the red box, you can see that you have 2 separate rows again. So you have this top bar, which has a fixed height. The other stuff is just the remaining height. And what you see here as well is you have some rounded corners going on. And that's where your knowledge of the toolbox kind of comes in and says, well, a frame, for example, which is a built-in control, has rounded corners or support for it. And Pancake Views, some others as well out there from the community have it as well. And zooming in even further, you see that you have some sort of list that is dynamically populated, which collection view is pretty much the de facto control for in Xamarin, which has all sorts of options which lets you repeat stuff vertically, horizontally, in columns. You can name it, it can probably do it. And one item is basically just a stack layout with different types of controls, images and labels stacked on top of one another, which is also just pretty much built-in stuff. If we take a quick look at the actual cart when it's expanded, this is once again a grid with multiple rows. The cart header is a row, the button down below is a row, another collection view, but this time it's repeating vertically. And basically what you also see here is you have some sort of footer behavior going on, because you have a delivery fee and a total, and that applies to the entire order, right? So that's something that typically goes into a footer, which collection view supports. And to do the transition, you basically just use swipe gesture recognizers, which do exactly as advertised. They handle a swipe gesture. And so if you detect a swipe up, you just translate height properties on the bottom part or the top part, depending on whether you're expanding or collapsing. So it's a pretty simple calculation happening there. So another thing that you might have noticed is that in the collapse state, the images of the products are just horizontally repeated, and the cart title is a bit smaller, whereas in the expanded version, it's vertically repeating and the cart title is higher, obviously. And there's also this little bubble with a 2 in it. So what you could do, obviously, is just change all those elements upon expanding or collapsing, but that's a lot of work translating them onto the right position and all that good stuff. So what I typically do in situations like that is, well, just fake it basically, which means add a just add it twice and show or hide one or the other. So the actual cart page looks like the one on the right, but whether it's expanded or collapsed, either the top or the bottom part is hidden. So yeah, sometimes you just need to make it simpler than it appears at first sight. And the detail page, it's really not that fancy. It's just stuff in a grid, just separate rows, because everything is pretty much laid out from top to bottom. We have a few things that are next to one another, so that's why I went with grid, because then you can also make columns. So yeah, the only thing that might be interesting here is that little fade down below where the text fades out. And that's really simple. Another simple hack, which is an image of a fade from transparent to white, just laid on top of that. So it's not the actual label that's fading out or something crazy like that. So I have a small demo of this. I'll quickly boot that up. So basically, this is what you end up with then. So we have the app, we have our scrolling going on, we have our little cart which transitions in between the collapsed and the expanded state. And we also have this animation where it transitions between both a detail and a list page using the image that you clicked on. So yeah, I think I whipped this together in half a day maybe, and it's obviously not entirely polished. I mean, some of the animation could be a little cooler, or maybe the timing of some things could be better. But it does show you that you can make some pretty cool stuff in a reasonable time frame. And looking at the code, it's pretty much what I just said. It's knowing the tools that you have, so all the controls like grid and what they can do, and just laying them out in a specific order. Very simply put. Obviously, some of this is harder to conceptualize, but yeah, there's nothing crazy happening here when it comes to the actual visual code. So if that didn't really tell you much about, or well, if it didn't convince you that you can do cool stuff, I already mentioned probably that the community is also very active in making all sorts of cool UI. So I just wanted to show you off a few of those. So we have this weather app, for example, by Oludayo, which has this little blur effect near the top in the background, and it has custom icons, custom fonts, so everything like that. It's pretty simple to pull off in Xamarin Forms, and it looks great if you ask me. Another sample by Kim, which uses animation a lot, so this slide out panel, and it even slides out twice basically. So you slide it up once for the short view, and then you slide it up again for a more detailed view, which is pretty awesome. And Kim also streams pretty regularly, and usually streams UI related stuff. So he's pretty good guy to follow when that's something you're interested in. So for example, this app, ordering food, I think we're all stuck at home ordering food. So this is a different take on that, with a different type of menu structure, because you have this ribbon on the left, which is basically your menu, and on the right you have the details. You don't see that in a lot of apps, so it's very conceptual, but it works pretty well, and it's all built in Xamarin Forms. And you also have this little Places app for whenever we can travel again, basically, which also uses some of those transitional elements to change views and to go into detail pages and all that stuff. So this starting view here, you can toggle between compact and expanded view, which is also pretty cool. So I think if I had to name one takeaway from all of this, if you can't fake it, if you can't make it, fake it. I think a lot of design stuff is, you think it's very complex, but it can be solved just by either doing it in a very simple manner, or maybe just doing it in a different way than you're you perceive that the thing is done. So faking things like a shadow by using an image, or an overlay of, for example, what I just showed you in the card, where you just have two elements and you hide the one in the expanded state and the other in the collapsed state. So I think a lot of this stuff is just figuring out how you could do it and then seeing if it can be made simpler. So what I want to leave you with here basically is another sheet of unmissable tools. Like I said, I'll share these later. But for example, the XAML hot reload, it's an addition that's been done recently, or well, it's been a while already, but if you haven't gotten around to using it, you definitely should, because it makes iterating on your UI that much simpler. Before that, basically every time you changed a color value or a margin or a padding, you had to reboot the entire app, rebuild it. It just was one big dev loop that took way too much time. And hot reload has really made that a lot simpler. So if you really want to get started on getting some inspiration, there's a lot of cool sites out there. And like I said, Kim streams regularly in the awesome Xamarin Forms category. And yeah, some other generators, I mentioned those regarding colors and fonts and all that stuff, and some NuGet packages that basically make your life a lot easier if you want to do some cool UI. And I think with that, I'm pretty much done. So yeah. Thanks for listening, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Well, thanks, Steven. That was wonderful. I see we've got a couple of questions which Matthew answered, and I think we'll be having some discussions at the social event after the presentations as well, to clarify further and to build out on that. There's one question from Naveen asking, can you show sample code flow for that? And it will be great to understand that folder, maybe just a folder structure.
The sample code, you mean probably this then? Let me see if I can zoom in a bit here. It's not wanting to zoom in, come on. You can do this. No zooming today.
It looks good. Yes, there we go.
There we go. Okay, so the sample code here is basically we have our Xamarin app, which consists of 3 projects, one for iOS, one for Android, and all of our shared UI code. So basically what that is in my case here is 2 pages, a detail and the main page, which are these that you see right here. So each page has a root element, which is a grid or a stack layout or any kind of visual hierarchy element that you want to use. So we have basically right here, we say on the main page, let's take that as a sample. We have some row definitions. So we have the 2 rows that I mentioned. The first row and the second row have their controls in it. And it's basically just stacking those elements on top of one another. And in the actual platform specific apps, there is really nothing of custom code. The only thing I have in here is fonts, which up until recently you had to put into each platform separately. Today that's not the case anymore, because you can currently put those into your shared code as well. So it could be updated to also move that into the shared code. So basically what you see here, all of this XAML code is written once, and it runs on both platforms without any additional code, basically. And other than that, there's a simple model in here of what a product looks like. Some view models that actually assign some test data into the overview that you saw. So all of this is just some hard-coded data, basically, because it's about the visuals in this sample. You would normally hook that up into an API, most likely. And you also have the app XAML, which is what I mentioned, all the style-related stuff. So all my colors are in here, and I just use these by name. So if I ever have to change my cream color into something like red, I could probably just do that right here. Now it's red. So that's the hot reload in action. So that pretty much shows you how much progress we can make quickly. So let's get rid of that. And all the way down here, there is the actual styles. So all my grids have some specific styling to them, but maybe even simpler to look at is this label. So basically every label in my app is black when it comes to text color, has a certain font, has a certain size, and that just applies to every label in the entire thing. And you can make specific exceptions like this one, for example, which is named, and that uses a different font and a different size. So that these few components are pretty much everything that makes up this app. And the only thing maybe worth showing here again is the actual swipe gesture. So if you swipe up, what actually happens? Well, it sets basically the menu bar to 0 height, and then does some animations when it comes to the height of specific parts. And it does a few fade to animations, which fades out stuff to 0 opacity. And that's it.
Oh, wonderful. Naveen, I hope that answers your question. And guys, if you have any questions that you want us to build out on, you're welcome to contact us, and you can even reach us at the Meetup site where you registered for the event. And I'm sure you can post more questions there, and we'll get back to you. Nelly Massina is asking to see an example of consuming RESTful in Xamarin. And I don't know if you have an example already, or whether that's something that we need to get back to.
That is a good question. It's not very UI related, obviously, but
Yes.
I can probably quickly show you a sample of how I do it in a different app, at least. Hold on a second. But this is very your own type of flavor, obviously. I mean, people do this in all sorts of different ways. But what I like to use personally is a package called Refit, which basically allows you to define all your API REST endpoints like this. So you have a certain object that you expect back from it. It has a certain URL endpoint basically, and this generates all of the boilerplate code under the hood for you using that refit package. So all you say is I want a REST service for that interface, and you can then just call into that and it'll call the API for you. So these lines for getting profile is basically just this one, get profile, the definition of what that endpoint looks like, and this initialization up top here saying REST service for that interface. That's one of the ways you can do it. There's numerous probably, but that's the one that I like to use.
Fantastic. Let's go to 2 non-coding questions. For one from Dustin asking, what do you do when you get customers requesting bad UI? I'm sure that's something you get quite often.
That's a good question.
It's a good question. When they want to request bad UI, well, typically I just tell the designer to convince them otherwise, because we do have the luxury of having a designer. So he does most of the heavy lifting there. I can't say that I have actually had a client request really bad UI. So what we tend to do is I heard someone speak, but I didn't get that. Or is that me echoing?
No, I think it was probably me.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. It's Dustin, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so the one I got was a sort of a side menu from the right, and you really have to stand on your head to get Xamarin Forms to do that, or anyway I do it.
Yeah. It's a side menu from the right. That's yeah. Okay. I would probably challenge them to find me another app that does that, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it's just not common practice indeed. And if they really don't want to budge, well, if it's implementable, I would probably just do it and they'll figure out soon enough that it doesn't work that way. But yeah, that might even be hard to implement to begin with.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Now the last question is from me, and I know as developers we all like our savory and sweet treats, but I really want to hear your story of how you got to the name of Pancake View.
Oh boy. Well, yeah. Every time I get asked that question, I come up with a different explanation. So it's been, my dad has worked in a pancake restaurant too. My grandpa has baked pancakes and all that stuff. But well, basically it was just, I don't know. It was more out of whimsy than anything else. There was mainly when people make NuGet packages, it's really serious and all that stuff. And yeah, I just wanted to keep it whimsical, I guess.
That sounds good. That's a nice.
There's no real explanation. I'm not
Or
eating
maybe you
pancakes
thought-
every day.
Maybe you felt guilty of breaking the family tradition. It's like, well, we're pancake packages now.
Yeah. Like I said,
That's true.
the story changes.
And I read something about the rounded corners, not the edges. I mean, the pancake is round, and maybe a bit of that in there.
A bit of that in there.
Well, Stephen, I want to thank you very much for absolutely great presentation. It was just, I think, at the right level, insightful, technical, but also non-technical in some ways. So it gives us a lot to work from. Thanks for the resources. I hope we can distribute that last slide to the guys who are keen to read further. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it, and well done. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. We are gonna switch to Dona as our next speaker. And wow, what a privilege to introduce Dona. Dona Sarkar is a software engineer, a multi-published author, a public speaker, and the owner of a fashion business. Even if you don't know Dona Sarkar's name, you will likely know her work, because if you're one of the 1.5 billion people using Windows, you've likely used something that she's built. Functions like the File Explorer tool in Windows, or even the Windows search or configuration, and I'm sure many other areas of Windows and functions in Windows was built by Dona and her team. She leads an advocacy team for the Microsoft Power Platform, and she's a former head of Microsoft Windows Insider Software Testing Group at Microsoft, of course, which she led from 2016 to 2019. She's a multi-author and for fictional and non-fictional books, including the title Model 47, a startup story. She's a notable speaker, and she has appeared on hundreds of stages around the world, including United Nations, World Economic Forum, and TEDx. In 2009, Dona started an ethically curated fashion line called Prima Donna, based in Seattle, Washington, which is what this talk will also touch on in terms of AI and the technology that you can apply to fabrics and fashion. What really gets me is that she was named one of the Fast Company 100 most productive people in business and Cosmopolitan Magazine's Business Person of the Year. So what an absolute honor to have you, Dona. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us tonight. We are honored to have you here. Thank you. And guys, she's going to talk about just one second there. She's going to talk about AIBuilder and how to source non-floral fabric for you easily. It sounds quite interesting. And over to you, Dona. I'm keen to hear more.
Thank you so much, Johan. By the way, I have to rewrite that bio wherever you got it from, because I sound like a jerk. Jeez,
No, it sounds wonderful.
Oh, so bad. Okay, thank you so much for letting me crash your session. What I loved about the last session is Stephen opens with, I'm not a designer, I'm a nerdy dev, and he shows like the most beautiful UI you've ever seen in your life. And I'm like, you have animations? You have icons? Where'd you get icons from? It was amazing. That was so good. I learned a lot, Stephen, especially looking at all of the Xamarin stuff and how, making it look different on making it look same on iOS and Android, etc. The reason this matters to me specifically is my team at Microsoft has recently grown. So I guess I haven't talked about this in public yet. And now we're going to. I was going to go do a tweet later, maybe at the end of the week, and share all the news, but I'll tell you now. We have had recently a series of reorgs at Microsoft, as we have all the time. And I used to lead advocacy for just Power Platform. And recently, as of like a month ago, I have inherited 2 other teams. So for advocacy specifically, I've inherited the .NET team and the Java team for from an advocate point of view. So I'm sure a lot of you know all of the Java advocates and the .NET advocates. Rory from South Africa, he's part of my team now. Then a bunch of the .NET folks like Shane and all of them. So they're going to keep working on exactly what they work on, and I'm going to keep working on exactly what I work on, and I'll get probably slightly more involved with .NET. I'll attempt to not get involved with Java because last time I did Java was like 1998, and my Java skills are like not so good. I am a C++ dev, and I am a platform C++ dev. So what that means is I can't build any UI. I mean, at all. If you're like draw a box and make it pink, I still can't do that. It has to be in PowerPoint, or have to go bribe somebody, some designer to do it. I don't know how to use CSS. It gives me the worst headache. So UI and I are not friends. Part of the reason I've learned is because I have dyslexia. So I really struggle with being able to mess around with pixels and code and have them be a certain way. Because numbers and letters, when they get intermingled, it's really, really brutal for me. I don't have this problem with code, but I do have it with any sort of like CSS, numbers and letters together. It's weird and random. If any of you have that problem, it's not unusual. I've heard this from a lot of people. Okay, so I was going to create a really cool AI demo for all of you, but then I got all kinds of news last night about Ignite and a bunch of stuff I'm going to be doing, and a keynote I have to give for a conference in, I think, September. And I'm like, you know what? Instead, I'm going to come and tell you some stuff. So this will be slightly random, but I think because we're all friends here, and I know many of you from my visits to South Africa, we're just gonna, kind of share some inside baseball, I guess, inside info. Okay, so I wrote this morning, so you have to. This is not surprising to any of you who've worked with me before. So I run a fashion company, as Johan mentioned. Oh, what is happening here? I run a fashion company on the side, and the thing to know, it's called Prima Dona because I'm Dona, and it is very, very challenging to run a fashion company while being a full-time manager. I have a weird driver issue because I took out an odd flight. So what I'm gonna do is get out of this. Okay, I'm gonna hang up and I'll be right back. Talk amongst yourselves.
Seems like we've lost Dona there for a moment. The Power Platform is really an amazing technology stack that's taking off and building in popularity around the software industry. You should check it out, Power BI and various others components that make up the Power Platform. It just makes non-coding development, if I can call it that, so much easier. It puts a lot of power in the hands of those who need to craft a solution very quickly and effectively. So go and check it out. It's Power Platform.
Well, wasn't it like last month? Was it Karika that did a talk on using Power BI and oh, Donna's back.
I'm back. See, I told you I'd be back. I didn't run away forever. Where did my... Oh, here. Okay. Can you see that? Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
So I run a fashion company and I do this on the side. And one of the things that my business partner and I've realized is that since both of us have busy day jobs, we need a full-time CTO to run our operations, our tracking, and our tech. And given that we can't afford to hire such a person, we are using Power Platform to be our CTO. The reason is because we also don't have time to write a whole bunch of code to do all this work. He and I are both software engineers. We have been for 18 years or so. But we need a low-code way to solve our problems. So one other thing I'd like to preempt right now, fashion designer does not equal UX designer. UX design is not my skill, it's not his skill, it's none of our skill. So our Power Apps and all of our things that we create in Power Platform are not beautiful, they are functional. But the point of Power Platform is that things are supposed to be for internal use for your company. If you have a designer on hand or someone who's vaguely good at UX, offload the UI part to them. But I always built the most like functional, useful, but hideous Power Apps you have ever seen. Okay, so last week, business partner says, you know, Donna, we are very random. We need to get all of our documents in order, like our tax forms and our receipts and all of the fabric you want to buy. We need to put them in one place. I'm thinking, what do you mean? And he said, you know, like a SharePoint site or something. And I thought, you're such a nerd, but okay, let's do that. I actually don't know how to build a SharePoint site. I use them a lot, but I've never built mine from scratch. So I looked up how to build a SharePoint site. This was yesterday, by the way, and Gomolemo knows because I complained the whole time. So step one, and this anyone in the world can do. So if any one of you know someone who wants to learn about Power Platform, wants to learn about Microsoft 365 or has a small business, go have them do this because it's completely free and you can renew this throughout. So just a quick life hack for all of you who coach and role model for others. Go join the M365 Microsoft 365 Dev Program. Just look up Microsoft 365 Dev Program. You'll come to this page. You sign up with any email address. It can be a Gmail, Outlook, whatever. And then once you do it, you assign yourself a license. So you get a free E5 license with this. So I made myself my own tenant. I felt like a badass because now I have my own tenant. So Prima Donna Studios on Microsoft.com. So as soon as you just sign up and assign a tenant, all of this is done for you. And then you can see this is my admin password here, PowerDivaYo at PD Studios on Microsoft.com. Then you have 90 days, and this does renew. So if you're using it, it keeps renewing, which is excellent news. Then I added my business partner as a user. I refuse to make him an admin because then you'll change things without telling me. So this is how I set up my business, backend portion of the program. Then I went to SharePoint.com, which is where you're supposed to go, and I provisioned myself a SharePoint site. So same handle, pdstudios.sharepoint.com, and that took like 5 minutes. So once I provisioned, I of course had to name my SharePoint site something. So I named it, business stuff because it's business stuff. Business partner says I need to stash business stuff somewhere, so I did this. This is a template that just comes in the box. So I just got it. Most of it's irrational and has nothing to do with us. So I'll replace it with stuff that's relevant for us. And right now we're just doing the thing. Okay. So once I provisioned my own SharePoint site, I am like, okay, cool. I'm going to build Power Apps using the SharePoint site as the backend. So far, I've used CDS, aka Dataflex, aka Oakdale, which is the low-code data storage thing that comes with Power Platform. I've used that and I've used Excel a lot, but I thought, let me use a SharePoint list because most of the businesses in the world use SharePoint list as the backend for Power Apps. So we've been looking at a lot of job descriptions for Power Apps to help people get these jobs. And almost 99% of the cases I've seen, people ask for SharePoint experience along with Power Apps. So we're thinking, all right, it sounds like most companies actually run like this, so we should walk in our user's shoes and use it. So over here in this corner, this widget, I chose add an app. And once you choose add an app, you choose this custom list thing. So once I created this custom list, I'm like, all right, cool. Now I'm ready to actually get into the Power Apps portion of the program. Can you still see that? Yeah, okay. So this was the custom list that was created. And I created a list called Donna bought fabric. Now, one of the business problems we have is that I buy way too much fabric, my partner says. I say it's for science. He says that I'm crazy. So the only ask he has of me is to track all of the fabric purchases because we need to first track how much money we spend. And second, for taxes, we need to mark them as expenses. And this is a huge challenge because I buy fabric all over the place, from like a street market in Joburg, which I've done many times, a random person by the side of the road in Nigeria, which I've done, Jakarta, like in a market where I just paid cash, online. There's all these places I buy fabric, but I can always get a receipt. But the problem is I usually wind up losing the receipt because I have a big stack of them. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to just take a picture of the receipt and scan that picture with the Power App, because then at least I will be able to capture that information and have it in a Power App. It won't be amazingly organized, but at least it's in the Sharepoint list. So I captured 2 of them that I got depressed on Valentine's Day and bought fabric because we were in quarantine. So, you know, no judgment. So I've got the Sharepoint list. And now what I'm going to do, I'll walk you through exactly the process I use to build our Power App. And you're going to make yours look way nicer than mine, but this shows what you can do in approximately like 5 minutes. Okay, so go to make.powerapps.com. When you sign up for that M365 dev account, you actually get Power Apps and Power Automate for free. And I actually also went to AIBuilder and signed up for a trial, a 30-day trial, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that later. But you set up your dev account, you get Power Apps for free, you come over here, you say, I want to start a trial, like get AIBuilder, and then you can just start a trial so you can learn stuff. So back to this, we're going to create our Power App. The data that we're using is a Sharepoint list. So we're going to do this. My internet is amazingly slow, so you'll have to bear with me. Okay. So what you can do is just paste the URL from your Sharepoint site. So you just go here, business stuff, and I just did this. So the list we want is Dona bought fabric. We've also got our inventory, like all of my fabric haul and inventory, which is useful. And then just connect. So all in all, the entire Power Platform is really useful for probably not devs like yourself, unless you're helping someone build something. It's very helpful for the people in your company who are not developers. So these are the customers and clients you have who might be HR, legal, finance, you know, teachers, all these different backgrounds who come from non-tech, non-computer science, history and job work X. So this winds up being really useful for them to solve their own business problems. Usually it's way faster if you have not bad internet. Last time I did this, I said I would record it so it wouldn't be so slow, but of course I did not do that. So while we wait for this, I hope all of you have blocked your calendar for Ignite. We are reviewing all the sessions, looking at the speakers, figuring out the keynotes, and it's going to be jam-packed. It's 48 hours, September 24th and 25th, I think, yeah. So it's 24 hours for 2 days. It'll be in your time zone, it'll be in our time zone. They're lining up the hosts, the speakers, everything. So block it, it's going to be really, really cool. And a bunch of announcements, by the way, a lot of announcements. Okay, so as you can see, this Power App just pulled directly from the Sharepoint list. Got my merchant name, the date, and the total. Where'd it go? Okay, merchant name, date, total. So now that I have this, I want to scan a new receipt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new screen. So Power Apps, the best thing is, oh, all right, so I promised people I'll show you how to make things look a little nicer. Let me do this. So like you can say like, all right, let's add a new screen and we'll make that one look nice. Blank screen. Add a blank screen, and then what I want to do is I want to add AIBuilder to this. So let me show you the AIBuilder options. I am not a data scientist, so I like these pre-built models that you get as part of AIBuilder. You can do a bunch of model training on your own. So if you want to do categories or entities or form processing, you should. I'll show you how to do object detection later. But right now, if you just want to use these pre-built ones that are already done for you, I highly recommend you try them out, especially if you're someone who either doesn't really like to do machine learning training or you're teaching someone to do it who has no idea what you're talking about. It's a cool way to show the power of AI without having to explain like basic calculus and computer science. So this is a new one. It's called receipt processing. It's in preview. I really, really like this. It does have some work it needs to do. I keep giving it a lot of feedback. So the more we train it and the more documents we give it, the better it's going to get. That's why it's preview. And the other one I really like is the business card reader. So if you haven't tried these out, try them out. You can try it out for free for 30 days. It's just a cool, handy thing that I think anyone can benefit from. So what we're going to do is build a Power App with receipt processing. So here we are. So we're at this screen. I want to add an item. What do we want to add? We want to add AIBuilder receipt processor. Okay. So we do this. Alrighty. Let's put that here. Now, what we want to do now is we're going to scan a receipt, and the fields we really cared about, as you saw, are, date is interesting to me, but more important is merchant and the total. So we're going to just add, and you can take all the time you want and put in like subtotal, items, all sorts of things. But because I don't want you to have to sit here and watch me do this all day, we're going to keep this short. So just fields, so like name, and the next one will be total cost. And then we just put in, and Gomolemo pointed out last week, you can just input a form, but because I want to show people actually how to build a thing from scratch, you can just pull in a form, and the form will pull directly from, you get the same fields as your SharePoint. But if you want to build a thing completely from scratch, here's how you would do it. And you notice, these boxes are not particularly lined up. Okay, so we've pulled in all the fields we want filled out. Now let's put some formulas in. You can see the name of this is called Receipt Processor 1. So what we would want here, just come up to the formula bar here. You type Receipt Processor. Yep, and then what would it be? Merchant name, right? So merchant name, and then this connector will do this work for me. Okay, here we go. Processor 1 dot total. Okay, so these are the things we want to capture and save. And speaking of save, we should probably have a button to save. Let's drag a button. I hope Stephen is still not watching because he'll be like, I know I mentioned I'm bad at UI, but this is ridiculous. So save. Now, right now, this doesn't do anything. So let's hit play. Let's scan a receipt and see what happens. These are all my fabric for my next project that I'll show you later. AIBuilder fun. Let's do scan, 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 scan. This is scanning. It's going to pluck out the name. Yep, got a typo there, but that's okay. And then the cost. Now you hit save and nothing happens because we haven't asked it to do anything. So instead, let's have it actually do something. Now here is where we're going to use the power of the Power Platform. What I love about Power Platform is all these pieces kind of work together. There's this thing called Power Automate, also known as Flow, that automatically does a bunch of business processes and business automation. So there are a bunch of flows that I have create for each of my tenants. And right now I'm going to just rebuild this flow so I can show you. The main thing to keep in mind is to make sure you're in the same tenant. So you're building a Power App, this environment, make sure you're in this environment because half the time it'll go to a different environment and then you're screwed because your flow from a different environment will not show up in this environment, just security issues. So that is something that I got bitten by a few months ago and I never forgot it. Okay, so let's build a flow for this save button. We want to insert an action. I'm going to insert that action with Power Automate. So let's create a new flow over here. and it is a Power App button. But what we want to do is add an item to SharePoint and send an email. I don't care that much about sending an email, but I care a lot about saving an item to SharePoint, and let's just use this one. So a bunch of these are out of box. You can build your own. I'm showing you the quickest way to do it. So for Power Apps, because we connected to it from the Power App, we don't have to do anything else specifically here. We connect to the site address, which we have because we connected the data source. And then the SharePoint list name, Dona.fabric. And then the title is going to be the created item title, whatever we pulled. And then the total will be, we actually want to ask in Power Apps and pull the total from the Power App itself. We don't want to hard code a total. So we're going to just leave this email part the same, and then we will create this flow. So next, it's really important to save. If you don't, the flow would not work. It won't show up anywhere. And once you save, I like to test the flow, perform the trigger action. This is where, you know, things don't connect, things don't compile, all of these things become obvious. So I call myself Dona the Diva Sarkar because obviously, so we will continue. And what do we want to call this? Oh, we want to call it, the title is the merchant, so let's call it Dona's Fabric Shop because a girl can dream. Send email. All right, let's just put this at fine. Jeremiah wants to see all my fabric receipts. He gets a lot of mail from me every time I bought fabric. There. Total. I'm going to tell him we spent $5,000 on fabric, and that will freak him out so bad. Yeah. Hey, this is that. Okay. So run this flow, test errors. No. Okay. Did I run this flow? Okay. So let's go back to here. We have created add an item to SharePoint. Right. Okay, this flow is associated now with this button. Hang on, did I do this? Flow is associated with this button. All right, but you're not done yet because you actually have to program the button to send this value. So over here in the formula bar, you can see that you need to put in this thing. It's asking for parameters. Okay, so first one, you say receipt processor 1 dot, what is this called? Merchant name. And the second field it wants is the email address. Send email to. Then let's send this to Jeremiah at theoriginstories.com. You can all email him and tell him how good my demo is. Don't do that. He'll be so, what the heck? Okay, create item total, receipt processor dot total. All right, so receipt processor dot total. Okay, now we have sent in all of the right input values. Yep. So that's about the only coding that takes place in Power Apps. So let's scan it and see if this worked. Grab that, scan, scan, scan. All right, we've got our cost. Let's hit save. Did that work? Let's go check out our business stuff. And there it is. And if I'd pulled in a date, if I'd added more columns, you can see it there too. Okay, so you can imagine you can do a lot with this. If you're scanning business cards, you can save them in Outlook. If you're, what one finance people like is taking the SharePoint list and exporting to an Excel. That way they have it all in one place and they can do those pivot tables and all of that. So that's something your finance people will be happy about. The next thing I want to show you, and I'm sure some of you know this, is there's a thing called AIBuilder, which we just used, but you can build your own models. Okay, so I promised flowers. We're going to get some flowers. So we're going to use this thing called object detection. And we're going to identify, I've actually built the flowers one already, which I'll show you in a second, but we are going to identify if a fabric that I bought has flowers or it has leaves. Recently, we've started doing unisex and menswear, and all dudes are like, I don't wear flowers, lady, this is crazy. That's the door with a shipment of fabric, by the way. So dudes are like, no, I don't really wear flowers, but I will wear leaves. And I said, okay. Thank you. Husband is getting the door. Leaves. So let's train this model. And, you know, training a model sounds very fancy, but here you really just choose a bunch of pictures and you choose the object that you want to detect. That object is leaf. Okay. So you save. And then this is the part that's really important. You need to upload a bunch of pictures. So let's go to this one. Now, the problem we have is I don't have enough pictures. That means I don't have enough fabric. So I need to obviously buy some more fabric because it's for science, but I'll show you how it will work. So we're uploading, these are uploading. Upload. Upload. Okay, so now we've got our pictures uploaded, and now we're going to identify leaves in each of these pictures. Let's see. Does this have any leaves? Can anyone see any? I don't. I see a bird, but I don't see any leaves. These are all ones I got from my travels, by the way. No leaves. I see a watermelon, no leaves. Aha, a leaf. Look. Identify. Leaf. Awesome. Leaves. More. No, those are horses, not leaves. So I would go through all of these. Oh, this looks like a leaf to me. Leaf. And tag all of them, leaf or not leaf. I need to get 15 images for sure, because without that the model can't train. Oh, look, so many leaves. This one's leaves for sure. So I would do this for 15, and at the end you'd get a little button that says train, and you'd click on it. So we will not do that right now. I'll show you something I did do already though. So close out of here. And back. All right. So in models, I have pre-trained this flowers one, doing exactly what I showed you just then. You can see it's still not that good because it's about 53% confidence that these are flowers that it's identifying. I can do a quick test. So these are the ones I trained on. The test one is below here. The new shipment of fabric that arrived will be good to photograph this weekend and get them trained. So look, about 96% confidence that these are flowers. And that makes me feel really good. So I can pull out this information and say like, you know, object detection dot flower or whatever, and be able to identify if what percentage of flower are in each of these in each of these apps. So once this is made, I can pull this into a Power Automate or into a Power App. I would probably just pull it into this Power App, make a new screen, and say like, okay, cool, here's where I scan receipts, throw them in the Sharepoint. I would just make another screen where I would scan fabric, and I would stash all of those into this thing that says inventory. And I would just stash my flower inventory. I did learn you can stash images in Sharepoint lists. Like, oh, I did this. Yeah, there you go. So you can stash all your images and track where things are at. Alrighty, so that is what I had for you. It is, of course, not done, but I will be doing this whole and properly as a keynote for ESPC, which is the European Sharepoint something conference, and I'll be showing a whole 1-hour demo on how Power Platform can be a CTO by using SharePoint, CDS, Excel, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agent, AIBuilder, and one more thing that I forgot. So that's all for me. Does anyone have questions?
So let's jump to the questions. You get a lot of compliments. Cool demo. Thanks, Dona. Wonderful to see the power. Something from my side, Dona, maybe it's just the Power Platform consists of a number of components. It's the Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents, etc. So if anyone who really enjoyed this talk want to get going on Power Platform, where's the best place to start? Should I jump in with Power Apps or?
I think the easiest place to start is with the Power App because it's visual. Figure out your data store first. I would say, what are you trying to do? The easiest thing for me is tracking inventory of something. So whatever you've got, you could be tracking inventory of like tables and chairs, of pens, and just put them into some sort of a data store. You saw mine. It's super freaking basic. It's so simple a finance person can look at it. Okay, like no offense, finance people, sorry. But the data store has to be super straightforward, and then build your first Power App and just focus on the navigation and what you want this app to do. But Power Apps is the best place to start. There's a resource, a whole bunch of resources we use a lot. There's a link called aka.ms/Power Academy. I made that page myself. It's on sarkar.com. It's not that official, but it's what I used to learn the entire Power Platform myself. And I taught myself this in like a span of a month, just by going through all of those tutorials. So once you build your first thing, then start looking up specific things like how do you do formula for this, or how do you, make this UI look nice. But the very first thing, build a basic app and then mess with it.
Awesome. Thank you. That's very good. Guys, we will post that exact address on our site, on the Meetup site as well, so you can go and check it out. Something else, we see a lot of talk about Power Platform, Power Apps, and this demo was incredibly insightful and really awesome. I want to ask, why should developers care? I know why, but can you maybe just elaborate on the roadmap, the future, where the industry is going, and really our responsibility, perhaps, as developers to look beyond back-end coding, beyond writing C# code, and maybe it's a non-development function that we need to play in terms of educating and choosing when to code and when to Power App, and put the power, excuse the pun, in the hands of the end users in that way. Maybe if you could just talk about what we as techies should do to move with Power Apps into the future.
Yeah, that is an awesome question. I actually have an AMA with the VP of the Power Platform team, Charles Lamanna, next Tuesday, August 25th. It's at 8:30 in the morning Pacific time, so maybe like 2 hours before this for all of you. So I would check that out. I'm asking exactly these questions to him. What does Power Platform mean for devs? Are you trying to put us out of jobs? Do you mean everyone in the world should learn coding? Do you mean we should be building Power Apps and not coding? So I have a lot of questions for him. But your question is a very legit one, which is, for developers, this just is yet another tool in the toolbox. No one is saying that if you're a Xamarin dev, you should stop building Android and iOS apps and you should start building Power Apps. You shouldn't do that unless you want to. So if you're someone like Steven who really likes building Xamarin apps, you're very good at it, please do that. But if you're Steven's HR person or finance person, you probably don't want to build Xamarin apps. You probably don't know what Xamarin is. You probably don't care. Instead, you need to build an expense tracker so you can figure out how much money is being spent in your org by like whatever, electricity, phone bills, et cetera. So what you want to do is solve your business problem as easily as possible. And that is when Power Platform becomes very useful. The developer's role is to create first awareness. So it's being able to tell all of these business functions at our companies, like, did you know that you can build your own chatbot? You can build your own app. You can build your own website. You can build your own visualization. You don't need to call on me every time. Here's how you do it. Just bring awareness, because the people in business functions in your companies are not watching Ignite. They're not watching Build. They rely on you not just to do coding work, but to bring them the industry news. So it is our responsibility as developer just to bring awareness to our companies. That's why I'm showing you all how to set up a SharePoint site. It's not because I don't think you don't know how to set up a SharePoint site. It's because most people in your company who aren't in tech have no idea how to set up a SharePoint site. And it would be pretty exciting if we never had to do it again. So step one is awareness. The second one is playing a role in collaborating. So there's a concept called Fusion Devs. You'll be hearing a lot about this all the time. Fusion Dev Teams. This is dev teams where there are coders and non-coders working together to solve a problem. Now, that usually is someone from a business function, HR, legal, finance, operations, a coder of some sort, and an IT person, admin of some sort. Now, how it usually works is business person says something like, we need to figure out how much our budget is for next year, so we know how many people we can hire. Coder says, okay, what does this have to do with me? Like, tell me what you want me to code and I'll code it. Like, I don't care about this conversation. HR says, fine, I'm going to do some financial modeling in the spreadsheet, blah, 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 things, charts, graphs. And then you need to write me, a website or an app where we can track our financial spending. Coder says, fine, just let me know when it's ready. So HR person finishes this work and says, here's the financial modeling. And then the coder now has to spend 6 weeks writing this, go back to HR. HR's like, no, that's not quite right. I don't like pie charts. I want bar charts. Okay, great. Let me go write pie charts, not bar charts. I need scatter graphs, not these graphs. I need another screen that shows details. And you go back and forth for months. When you're done, you bounce it over to IT, and IT deploys it onto the devices of people. That is how things usually work. And it's annoying for everybody because business person is like, I'm really smart. I can't believe I have to keep relying on this dev to make the tiniest pixel change or make this box, 2 lines instead of 1 line. And the dev is like, dude, I have shit to do, right? I need to figure out how to connect to this custom API. I need to figure out this data store, security's broken. I don't have time to mess with your UI. So this is where Power Platform becomes very useful, where the devs can focus on things devs care about, like how do you extend this app to be scalable on Azure? Or how do you build a custom connector to hook into that weird private API someone wrote in 1994? Or how do you automate this thing that doesn't have APIs at all? So devs are always stuck in code land. That's where we want to live. And this allows the business folks to not have to deal with code and for us not to have to deal with non-code. So it's a partnership where devs should be writing controls, the back end connectors, and the business function should be creating the front end, etc. IT's role is still there. They're the third, foot of the stool or whatever it's called. No one should be randomly deploying these apps unless you're testing it. It should be through IT, through some sort of a center of excellence, an admin team who decides who exactly should have this app. How do we push updates? Who should have permission to edit versus consume? So it should be this unit of people called the Fusion Dev Team. You'll be hearing a lot about this and seeing a ton of examples because these are the most functional development teams in the world, Fusion Devs.
Oh, thank you. It's a brilliant answer.
But tune into the AMA because Charles will give you some, roadmappy stuff. If I tell roadmappy stuff, I'll be immediately unemployed, but he won't.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And then I think something else from my side, just because of who you are and how wonderfully you're speaking to us and your experience. 2020 has been somewhat of a crazy year, to say the least. And we, as developers, we need focus. We need to enter that state of flow. We need to innovate and express ourselves and work towards where we want to get to. And it's been, I think, a challenge for all of us. So, if you have a message that you want, a message of encouragement based on your experience that you might want to share with this group tonight, just as a few final words, I will appreciate it.
Yeah, I believe that right now, the entire world is in the biggest challenge we have seen in most of our lifetimes. And it is also the first time everybody in the world has this concern top of mind. Usually it's this country's election or a war in that country or a hurricane over here. But this is the first time in my entire life, and probably most of your entire life, everybody in the world is affected by one giant, huge freaking crisis. And it has brought some really, really ugly truths to light, namely the digital divide, where those who have access to computing and access to internet connectivity were able to live a decent life during this time. And the ones who don't have tech skills have been suffering, they've been struggling, they've been forced into situations they really shouldn't be in. It's been incredibly, incredibly challenging for me as a tech person, and probably for all of you as tech people, to see so much suffering in the hands of our fellow humans because they don't have tech skills or tech background. It is brutal. We have a superpower. Technology is a superpower, and it is the modern literacy. If we didn't have this, we would be exactly in the same boat as everyone else. And I truly believe that it is our responsibility as tech people to help upskill our communities. That's why I do this job. That's why I care so deeply about this job. That's why I'm building a team of like ace upskillers, Gomolemo being one of them, by the way. Because it is our job to upskill our communities, because no one else is going to do it. Our schools are not going to do it, okay? If they were going to do it, they would have done it by now. They're not going to do it. Our government definitely not going to do it. They can't even upskill themselves, right? It's just not going to happen. So it comes down to us, who are leaders in the community, who are knowledgeable, who know how to teach, who know how to speak, who know how to inspire. It is our job to go out there and upskill our communities. And that can be anything you need it to be. That can be people in your family, it can be people in your neighborhood, it can be students, it can be adults. We at Microsoft are deeply committed to upskilling 25 million people in the next fiscal year. And this is part of my job. I have it on my commitments for the year. Contribute to helping upskill 25 million people. Gomolemo has it on his commitments. Upskill 25 million people. He's focusing on students and emerging markets. I'm focusing on just finding opportunities all over. We have another teammate focused on career switchers, people who are going from financial services to this, teaching to this, all of these other industries that have been impacted so badly. But it is everyone's responsibility. And if we decide to take on this opportunity, we will emerge as a modern day hero, because tech is one of those fields where just because you add people to it doesn't mean your importance goes down. Your importance only grows, because just keep in mind, it takes way more strength to pull someone up than to push them down. So go forth, do the thing. If you need help, just reach out, because upskilling is the thing that we as an industry are going to be focusing on for the next year.
Wow, wonderfully said. Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. And those are some really beautiful pearls of wisdom. I think there's a saying, to whom much is given, much is expected. And we have so much of the tech and our talent. And yes, we should go out and change the communities. Thank you for that encouragement. Well, thank you for your time. It's been wonderfully having you. And well, for our group, we appreciate it.
I'll see everyone. And I'll see you in South Africa soon. Oh my God.
Hope so.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, that was wonderful and refreshing. I hope that you will all go and check it out. Power Platform, starting with Power Apps. It's incredible, and it's definitely something that I want to explore further, and I hope you will do the same. Next up, we're going to talk to Gregana Young. I've had the privilege of meeting Gregana and Johannesburg at Microsoft Ignited, to a wonderful speaker. I really enjoy her talks, and we are so privileged to having her here tonight. You're in for a treat. She's a South African software developer, adventurer, and Star Wars geek extraordinaire. She intends on making a career of reprogramming astromech droids with JavaScript. And in her spare time, she builds cool gadgets and stuff for other passions like rock climbing, running, and of course Star Wars. So tonight she's going to talk about your JavaScript in the cloud. She's going to explain to us and show us how you can use Microsoft Azure, GitHub, Azure pipelines to take an application built entirely in JavaScript and put it in the cloud. And the best part of this is that the process is fully automated, and every time there's a push to the master branch, the application runs through all of the necessary checks and updates automatically. So Gregana, welcome. Thank you for your time. It's wonderful to have you. I've seen and heard this talk before. It's a really nice talk. So guys, enjoy it, and over to you, Gregana.
Hey, thanks for that intro. Give away some of my talk there, but I'll do my best. Cool. Well, hi everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for being here, for listening to me. And so today we're going to talk about getting your JavaScript app to the cloud. But before we get there, let me quickly do my own intro. I know Johan already said a lot of the stuff, but my name is Gergana. I usually go by Jerry because that's a lot easier to pronounce. You can see my Twitter handle and my website on the screen if you want to check out some of the other weird things that I build in my spare time. Go check them out on there. I work for a company called Cora. I am also a co-organizer of the Josie JS meetup, which is the Johannesburg JavaScript meetup. And shameless plug, we meet online every third Thursday of the month, or second last Thursday of the month. So due to the times we live in, everything's online. So please join us if you want to know more about JavaScript every month. Yeah. Also Microsoft MVP in Windows development. I was awarded the MVP award because of my contributions to the South African dev community in terms of IoT, because I really love IoT. And as Johan said, I also really love Star Wars. And the way this whole thing started was with me reprogramming a little Star Wars robot using JavaScript. And I did my first talk on that. And ever since then, I've been talking about JavaScript and IoT. And there has been things like wine buttons and lightsabers and garage door automation. Unfortunately, this talk does not have any things in it. For those of you who know my talks, you may be thinking that this is going to be a more boring talk, but I promise we'll still keep it fun, because there's still going to be JavaScript. Now, as developers, we all get to a point in time where our job is not just our job, so we want to build something for ourselves. We want to do something with the skills we have for work. And when you're building JavaScript web applications, if they're static sites, it's not that difficult to get them onto the cloud and show them to people. But when they become a bit more complicated, they have a backend with some business logic or something to that effect, then it becomes a bit harder. And then we all hear that dreaded phrase. Well, it's dreaded for me at least. I know for some other people too. But DevOps. DevOps is one of the biggest buzzwords of our time. It's been around for a while now, and the definition of DevOps is kind of difficult. So this is what Wikipedia says. DevOps is a set of practices that combine software development and information technology operations, which aims to shorten the system development lifecycle. Now, I would forgive you if you're feeling a little bit like this right now, because what does that even mean? Well, I found that DevOps means different things to different people and different teams, and it depends on what you really want to accomplish, and you take DevOps and make it your own. In terms of what we're trying to achieve now, DevOps is actually kind of simple, and because of that, we're going to use Azure Devops. Azure Devops is a set of developer services, formerly known as TFS, but it's the much newer and much improved version of TFS. And There's a number of different services available within Azure Devops, and it's so that both developers and operations people can work together to get their applications into the cloud. So we have Azure Boards, which is for like agile planning, tracking, prioritizing your work, etc. Azure Repos is a set of Git repos. Azure Pipelines, which is what we're actually going to use today, used for building and testing and deploying your applications to the clouds, any of the clouds. Azure Test Plans provides us with manual and automated testing tools for our code on pretty much any platform. And then Azure Artifacts for hosting packages. So we're going to use a small subset of Azure DevOps, or actually only the pipelines part. For hosting our code, we're going to use GitHub because I found that most pet projects for most developers have tend to use GitHub. And we're going to deploy to Azure because that's the cloud it's easiest to deploy to from Azure Pipelines. So let's get to it. We're going to start with our first demo. Now, I recorded these demos because I did this talk a little while ago, and with my slow internet, I would sit and wait while everything was deploying and busy building and doing things. So everything is recorded. So the first thing we're going to do is go to portal.azure.com and click on Create a New Resource. In the search, we're going to search for Web App and click on Create. Here, we're going to either create a new resource group, but I already have one, so I'm just going to use it. It's called Demo. The name of your application has to be something unique. So we're going to be building a website for the Josie.js meetup groups. So we're going to call it Josie.js. We're going to select our runtime. It will be Node 12 because we're building a JavaScript application. We're running on Linux. We're going to choose to run in South Africa because that's closest to us. So we want our website to run a bit faster. And the last thing we need to do is create an app service plan. This we can name something unique as well. So I'm not very good at naming things. So most of the things are just called demo and things like that. Changing the size is important because the size of your VM is how much you're going to get charged for your web app. So I'm choosing the cheapest available option because we're building a relatively simple website. And then we can click Review and Create. This shows you a summary of what you just did. Just double check that everything's correct and hit the Create button. Now this deployment takes a little bit of time. So we're going to leave it to deploy there. And in the meantime, I just want to show you. I think I'm still sharing. I hope you can see that. But this is what the website is actually going to be to look like. All right, so let's move on. Now we have our web app in Azure. Now we need to get our code to that web app so that it actually shows something. Well, first thing we need to do is build our code so that it's ready to be deployed. And this is another topic that is very opinionated in our industry. I found many people have many opinions and there's many arguments online about what is the best way to do things. And again, I feel like it works differently depending on the team you're in or depending on the thing you're trying to accomplish. But one thing I found that works for me, and we've used it quite a lot, is putting a lot of the responsibility of this on the actual developer who's writing the code. Because I always find that having the responsibility or knowing that any code that you push to the master branch will go to production at any point in time makes you feel like you are responsible for that code and that you shouldn't break anything. There are ways to mitigate some of the risks, things like including testing, so making sure that there's unit tests, integration tests, all kinds of tests in your code to make sure that nothing goes wrong. Using a pull request model, because always having a second set of eyes on your code is a good thing. Sometimes we miss things when we're coding for long periods of time. So it's good to have a second set of eyes, and a rollback strategy. Now, because there are always cases where something will go wrong, having a rollback strategy is quite important. Being able to revert to a previous version where things aren't broken. And with that, we're going to use Azure Pipelines to move into our second demo. So for our second demo, we're going to go to dev.azure.com. That's Azure Devops, and click Create New Project. Name our project with our very creative Josie.js demo. And we're going to make it a public project so that it's visible, because the GitHub repo is also public. Once you hit create there, it takes a couple of seconds to create and takes you to the overview page, which has everything that I mentioned earlier related to Azure DevOps. So you have the boards, the repos, pipelines, test plans, artifacts. It's all there. The repos is where you can store your code and build your pipelines from those repos. But as I said earlier, we're going to use GitHub for this example because the code was already in GitHub. So we're going to go to pipelines and start making our build pipeline. So we click on pipelines and then create a new pipeline. Here, the first thing we need to do is link it to a repository that we're going to be deploying. The first time you do this, it will ask you for permissions to access your GitHub repositories, and you can limit it to only have access to certain repositories, which is also quite nice. Cool. So I'm going to select that repo that I've created over there. And then it gives me a bunch of templates. So I could use a template, depending on what website I'm building. I could just use a built-in template and it will do everything for me, which is quite nice. So if you're using Node and Vue or Node and React or just a Node and Express web app. But for the purposes of the demo, I want to show you how to build one of these pipelines from scratch. So here's our pipeline. There is our repo, and it's going to create a file called Azure Pipelines.yaml inside that repo. So the first thing in the pipeline is the trigger. So this is when will this pipeline trigger. Every time we commit to the master branch, this pipeline will run. You can do things like make it run on a specific PR or a specific branch, whichever way you prefer. Then we have the pool. So what platform we're going to be running this pipeline in. It's good to choose a platform that's related to what you're going to be actually running in production. And then we have the steps. So let's get rid of the existing steps and make our own steps. There are two types of steps. The first one we're going to create is a task. We're going to use a built-in task to install Node on our image. So the @0 over there is the version of this built-in task. It's usually good to use the latest available version of the built-in tasks. The task takes in a bunch of inputs. The inputs for the Node tool task are the version of Node you want to install. So if you remember when we created the app, we made it version 12, the latest available. So we're going to make this version 12 as well. And then the last thing we have to do is give it a display name. The display name is something that's meaningful to you. What is the step actually doing? Because if it fails, you want to be able to find what the steps actually did. Cool. Now we can move on to step 2. Step 2 is going to be a different kind of step. It's going to be a script. A script is something that can run in the command line. So something like, in our case, npm install. We want to install all of our Node dependencies before we start running anything. And let's give it a display name as well. And that's just going to be install the app dependencies. Our next script is next step, sorry, is going to also be a script. This script is going to run all of our tests. So this is running the unit tests, which I'm going to show you in a moment how they're actually running. But let's give that a name as well. And we're just going to say run the tests or the unit tests, I guess. Once we've tested our code, because it's a Node application, we don't need to do any building or anything. We know that we're ready to now publish this to the cloud. So we're going to use a task, a built-in task, to firstly copy the files. And you see we're using version 2, latest available. When we copy the files, we need to provide a number of inputs for this built-in task. Firstly, the source folder. The source folder is defined based on the system. So it will be just the system default working directory. Then the next thing we need to define is the content. So what are we actually copying? And here we're going to specify that we want to copy absolutely everything by using just ***. But
Hi guys, we are trying to get Jerry back. I hope you can hear me and that it's not only my session that froze up. We will be back online in a moment, I hope.
We need some sweet load music for when this happens.
Well, someone can start singing.
I was about to ask if we had any jokes.
They had some interesting jokes at the UnoConf between each session. They were interesting.
But now you have to share. You can't like just drop that on us and then not share.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember it. They were like dad jokes, and I was a bit nervous. There were mom jokes, I think that there were, as they put it.
Yeah. I saw like a meme on jokes the other day where a kid was asked what they want to be when they grow up, and they said, "As funny as Dad thinks he is."
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Sorry, my internet just died. I have no idea why. I'm sorry about that. I can share my screen, and I have no idea where I was. I'm sorry.
You were typing in the YAML script after the install. Yep, the double stars.
Cool. Hey, actually,
That's right.
The right place. Awesome. Cool. Okay. And then what we do next is we provide a target folder, and that's it. Should I pause here and recap what we just did? Because, damn it, even now my internet's bad. I'm sorry about this. Okay. So what we did is we created, we installed Node. We ran an npm install, we ran an npm test, and then we started copying the files. We copied the files from the default working directory, the entire contents of it, and into the artifact staging directory. So this is where we're putting our files as a staging point. All right, cool. And then the last step in this task is to display, to add a display name as well. Interestingly enough, we still have power, we just don't have the internet. Okay, and then we need one more step in the YAML file, which is to now publish these files into a directory so that they can be ready to deploy to the cloud. So we're going to use another built-in task over here called publish build artifact, and its inputs are going to be the path to publish. So that would be that target folder that we created, as well as the name of the artifact that we're creating. And I'm just going to call it app because, again, I'm bad at naming things. And our display name over here, last thing we need to do is publish the build artifacts. Once we've created this file, we're going to save it, not by pushing Control-S, but just by clicking save and run. And what that will do is this will actually commit the file into our Git repo. So that's why it's even adding a commit message for us. And it creates the pipeline, adds it to our Git repo. So if we go to our local version of the Git repo and we just do a Git pull, we'll see that file come up. Cool, there it is. And if we open it in our favorite code editor, we can see the whole file here. One thing that's cool about this as well is you can just edit it, push it back into the Git repo, and it will do any of the changes that you've created in there. And now our job is running. So it's checked out the code from the Git repo. We didn't tell it to do that, but it knows how to do that because we linked it to that repo. And it's done a bunch of other steps, but one of our steps is failing, the unit tests. Oh no. So let's go back to our code and check and try to run our unit tests to see if it's a problem with our pipeline. No, it seems to be a problem with one of our unit tests. So let's go check that test out. So I know this is not a very real unit test, but I wanted to just show you for purposes of an example how to create your unit test. So we're going to change that expect from false to true. And this is how we're running the test. So I'm using Jest. You can use your favorite node testing library here. I just use Jest because I know how. And we're going to add that into our Git repo. It's important that this commit message over here is something meaningful because that's going to be the name of the run of your pipeline. Again, naming things is hard, but it's important. And if we do a git push to our repo and we go back to our pipelines, if we go to the pipeline, we can see that a new one is starting up. You can see there it's called fixed tests. And if we open it up, sorry about that, that paused the video. We can see it's now running, and now it will run the unit test successfully. So this takes a little bit of time because npm install usually downloads the entire internet, as we all know, and then it will run through the unit test and hopefully go through the entire process successfully. So now that we've built our app, let's talk about some of the other things that these pipelines can do. We created a relatively simple pipeline, but you can do a lot more with these kinds of build pipelines. You can do things like building strategies to run on multiple different platforms. So if you need your code to be able to build on Ubuntu, Mac, and Windows, then you would use a strategy like this and then use a variable to say which one it needs to run on. You can also do things like stages. So we only had a build stage in our case, but say you want to do both a build and a deploy, then you could have a set of steps that happens in the build stage and a set of steps that happens in the deploy stage. The deploy stage also depends on the build. So if the build succeeds, only then do we deploy. And we can do things like adding a strategy inside our stage to only run the deploy once, because we don't want to deploy things more than once. We saw some of the built-in tasks like copying files and publishing and installing Node, and there are a ton more built-in tasks. So they build tasks to build different platforms, different languages. They're utility tool and tool tasks like the ones we saw. There's testing tasks for a whole range of different languages as well, and packaging and deploy tasks as well. And you can create your own task. If you can't find one of the built-in ones, you can definitely create your own. All right, now on to the last part of the demo. So if we go back here, we can see that our job has now succeeded or completed successfully. And now, because I showed you how to do the stages using the code, I want to show you a different way of doing the release, using a release pipeline. So let's go create a new pipeline. Here, we're going to use a templated one, an Azure App Service deploy. We've already created an Azure App Service, so we can call our stage, deploy website or deploy Josie.js demo. Then we'll go to the job. What are we actually going to do? Well, first thing we need to do is connect to our Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, or whichever subscription you have, so that you can load up that web app that we created earlier. Web app on Linux, if you remember correctly, we selected Linux, and there it is, Josie.js. The startup command we're going to leave blank. I'll explain to you why we're leaving it blank a little bit later. Now we need to actually deploy it. The display name, you can change the display name if you want to. I'm just going to leave it as is. You can leave pretty much all of the other things. The one part that you do need to change is what we're actually deploying. But we don't have any artifacts yet. We don't have anything to deploy. You can see there, we haven't actually given this pipeline anything to deploy. So we close this and go back to our pipeline so we can give it something to deploy. Click on Add an Artifact, and we're going to choose that build pipeline we created as our main artifact. Don't need to change anything else. It just gives it an alias, and we say Add. We also want this to happen every time we make a change. So every time a successful build happens. So we're going to enable that in the continuous deployment trigger. You can also add filters so that it only deploys certain branches. For ours, we only have a master branch for now, so it doesn't really matter. Now we can go back to editing the task and give it an actual artifact. So here we now have that folder we created called app, and we can just say use that folder. The last thing we need to add is the runtime stack. Again, we're running on node 12, so we choose node 12 over there. And we're ready to go. We just need to hit save, and it will ask you where you want to save it. You can just save it in the default folder, and that will create a new release. So we click create, and release 1 has been created. Now this takes a little bit of time again. It's queued up. It will run for a few seconds, so let's just fast forward in time. So our deploy to Josie.js has succeeded. If we go to releases, we can see we have one successful release. And now, if we go to our actual website, we can click. And the first time this loads, it takes a little bit of time, but it eventually will load up our website. There it is. Cool, hey? So now that we're done deploying, let's make a change and see how easy it is to actually just make a quick change. So in our HTML file, we're going to add just one paragraph tag. Follow us on Twitter, add the Josie.js Twitter handle. And let's save that and push it to Git. Add a Twitter handle, and we do a push. Cool. That will start up a new run in our build pipeline. Let's go take a look at it. It's busy starting up. As soon as it starts up, we can again fast forward a little bit, and there it's on the last step. Once it's done, we can now go to our release and see it start up a new release. So all of this is now automatic, right? We don't have to do anything more than just push to our GitHub repo. And that will deploy. After a little bit of time, our deploy has succeeded. So if we just go to the website and reload, we can see the follow us on Twitter with my follow spelling mistake, which I have actually fixed since then. And that's actually pretty much all I have for you. But yeah, that's how easy it is to deploy your websites to Azure. Thanks a lot for listening. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Jerry. That was really nice, very slick, and really, really powerful. I'm just looking through the Q&A. I don't see any specific questions there, but maybe I can ask you, where should people go to learn more about this and to really get into it, assuming they start from scratch?
So I've actually found that the Microsoft Docs is pretty much the best place to figure this stuff out. They're very informative, and they take you through quite a lot of examples in different languages using different platforms, using both Azure Devops and GitHub Actions. You can find pretty much all of the info on there. That's where I found all of this stuff. And they even have example projects and things like that. So yeah, if you're starting out, that's probably one of the best places to go.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think a lot of us probably have projects in progress, half-baked projects, if I can call it that. Is it can we implement these principles and tools in running projects, or is it better to start a new project with it?
I think you can pretty much put it in anywhere along the line, right? As an example, recently at my company, we moved to using GitHub Actions for all of our deployments. Previously, we were doing everything manually, running the scripts one by one. You have to remember to run them in order. Now, using pipelines and GitHub Actions, which is actually quite similar to Azure pipelines, it makes it all easier. less room for human error.
Okay, that sounds good. So that was my next question, was just maybe to elaborate a bit on the difference between Azure pipelines and GitHub Actions and when to use which one. But it sounds like Azure pipelines is more matured and maybe more flexible. Is that right?
So as far as I know, Azure Pipelines has been around for longer, but when it used to be TFS, I know a lot of people didn't actually like it. I never used it when it was still TFS, but I really enjoy using pipelines, Azure Pipelines. It's quite slick. It's easy to use. The UI is very good. One thing I've found with using GitHub Actions recently is a lot of the stuff you have to do in GitHub Actions, you have to do in code in the YAML. You don't have nice UI yet. And I guess that's, like you said, it's because it's still relatively new and still getting there in terms of that. So yeah, it really depends on what you're doing.
Yes. Okay. Well, thanks for that. It was a really nice talk. The compliments, we see more compliments and questions saying that you're telling it so patiently and the audience like it. So thank you. I think it's, guys, the recording will be posted from the link that you follow the link on from our meetup site where you registered for this event. So what I did when I saw this talk or heard this talk the first time was to go back to the recording and to look at it again and kind of use it also along with the Microsoft Docs as a training reference. Go over the things that Jerry explained and try and practice it and apply it to your project. I think the one key thing that you said, Jerry, is also that it's not cast in stone. You need to mold it a little bit to your team and your project, and that's what it's built for. So go and do that and have fun and explore it. It's you've presented it at a very nice level, Jerry. So thanks for that. Thanks for your time and thanks for choosing to present this tonight to us.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and also I actually, again, shameless plug, I have a blog post on this same thing. Again, you can check out my website, and it uses pretty much the same method except using the actual Azure Devops repos for deploying to Azure. So you can check that out.
Sweet.
As well.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Okay, good. I think that brings us to a close for the evening. Alan, if you can maybe just present the closing slides there so that we can just wrap up. We are very fortunate to have had you here with us, and thank you very much for joining us. The MS Developer User Group started off in Cape Town, Joburg and Durban. But like Homer said, we united, we joined forces, we work together. So I want to say thank you very much to all the speakers, those who are online still. A lot of preparation goes into the sessions, and we appreciate it. It's really great. I've got colleagues and friends from India tonight in the session, and they will be spreading the word out there and sharing your sessions and the video recording out there. So we're doing a good thing. So thank you, speakers. I do appreciate it. All of us appreciate it. And to everyone who attended, it's not an in-person event, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you get value from it. I hope that you can connect to us, reach out to us, reach out to the speakers. Let's build out this community and support one another. There are great topics coming in the next few months, awesome sessions lined up. You can submit to talk by going to sessionize.com. The link is on the screen, and I hope to see you next month again. I hope that we get to support one another through this time where we work remotely and build out a community. And then a special thanks to Alan Pede, who basically heads up this initiative and work with all the co-organizers to get it done. It's a wonderful event. So have a wonderful evening, have a wonderful week. We will be back online next month for the next event. Take care.
If you want to join us later on, there's a networking event at the URL that's on the screen right now. But thank you very much for everyone that attended, and thank you to the amazing speakers. It was an awesome evening.